ropes of what was important and what was not, and what I should bring and what I shouldn't bring out on missions. Because there's you find that you end up with a lot of weight. And when you go out on certain missions, you have a lot of things that are important. You got to bring your weapons. You want to make sure you have kit. It's protection from your kit is your armor, your protection from enemy fire, and all kinds of other things, and from getting too cold. That was a joke, you know. But keeps you hot. Your helmet and your ammunition. So I was prepared to go out on this mission. And we had been out on several missions. I thought I had it down. You know, I had the things I needed. I had extra ammo. And I had one bottle of water, you know, with me, which was like maybe 17 ounces of water. You know, to be fair, everyone was bringing that out. We weren't supposed to go out for very long. It was supposed to be a quick in and out mission. So I went out. It was nighttime. It was still kind of cool. You know, the sun wasn't beating down or anything. And as we were walking, the mission ended up going much longer than we had anticipated. It was a maze, and things kind of went crazy. And so during the process of this mission, we ended up having to hold up in a place for the night and wait till morning so that we could get so we could get out of there. Because the people that were supposed to pick us up wouldn't come in the nighttime to pick us up. So we were stuck out, and now the sun's coming up. It's not nighttime anymore, and I had long drank my water. And all of us were kind of in the same boat. All of us in our platoon were in the same boat. We had valued ammunition and all these things over the water we had in our packs, and now we were all out of water, and we'd been running from one place to the next. We had guys with us now that we picked up detained, and it was starting to get hot. And I just remember, you know, the sweat and coming down, and I'm trying to guard, and I'm thinking, man, I should have brought more water. Water was just something that kept coming up in my head, and we actually ended up drinking out of one of the wells there, which isn't usually something you ever do because you never know what kind of disease you're going to get. But we drank from one of the wells, and I just remember when we finally got out of that situation, out of that village, and we were picked up at the convoy. They gave us these cold waters. I don't know where they got them, but they were cold, and it was probably the most refreshing water I had ever drank in that time of my life. It was amazing, but from then on I valued water a little more when I went on the missions. And I just say that to start. Today we're going to be talking about water and the lack of in the wilderness. And if you haven't already guessed, we're going to be in Numbers, chapter 20. I'm going to go and read out the passage and we'll talk about it. Yes, if you didn't bring your Bible, I'll immediately put it on the slide. So. Numbers chapter 20. In the first month of the year, the whole community of Israel arrived in the wilderness of Zin and camped at Kadesh. While they were there, Miriam died and was buried. There was no water for these people to drink at this place. So they rebelled against Moses and Aaron. The people blamed Moses and said, "If only we had died in the Lord's presence with our brothers. Why have you brought the congregation of the Lord's people into this wilderness to die, along with all of our livestock?" As if that's... "Why did you make us leave Egypt and bring us here to this terrible place? This land has no grain, no figs, no grapes, no pomegranates, and no water to drink." Moses and Aaron turned away from the people and went to the entrance of the tabernacle, where they fell face down on the ground. Then the glorious presence of the Lord appeared to them, and the Lord said to Moses, "You and Aaron must take the staff and assemble the entire community. And as the people watch, speak to the rock over there, and it will pour out its water. For you will provide enough water from the rock to satisfy the whole community and their livestock." So Moses did as he was told. He took the staff from the place where it was kept before the Lord. Then he and Aaron summoned the people to come and gather at the rock. "Listen, you rebels," he shouted. Must we bring water from this rock? Then Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with the staff, and water gushed out. So the entire community and their livestock drank their fill. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust me enough to demonstrate my holiness to the people of Israel, you will not lead them into the land I am giving them. This place was known as the waters of Meribah, which means arguing, because the people of Israel argued with the Lord, and there he demonstrated his holiness among them. Okay. Now at this point, just to give you a little bit of background, we're not just going to throw you into this point of Israel's life without looking at what's been happening. It seems like, as you guys know the story of Israel, they have a long line of failures. You know, in high school when you see the wall, they have the trophy wall and they have like the banners of, you know, state champs this year, state champs. Israel could have a wall with big failure here, you know, it's just, in chapter 14, Numbers kind of lays it out well. It's almost a stepping stone process, one failure after the other. In chapter 14, we have the 12 spies story, and Israel goes out. They're on the verge of the promised land. They're on the verge of taking what God has promised them captive from Egypt to Canaan. And what happened? I mean, we all know the story. They fail, right? They send out the spies. The spies bring a bad report. And their lack of trust in God's ability to provide for them, and that situation fails. And Moses, the leader, has to intercede for them. He comes before God. God basically almost forces Moses' hand, and Moses has to intercede lest he kill all of the Israelite people. So that's chapter 14. We go to chapter 16. After the people have already experienced such a great failure in that, and they've realized they're wrong and tried to go out into war and were defeated. Now we have in chapter 16 of Numbers, Israelite leaders, and it was Korah, who was a Levite, a chief of the Levites. And the Levites were, you know, they were the people of all of Israel who were supposed to be the priests of God, who were supposed to represent God's people above all else. And the chief Levite, Korah, and a lot of the chieftains had decided that Moses wasn't God's leader for the group. They rebelled against Moses. They didn't trust God's leadership, and God had to show them through the budding staff and through his punishment on them who were the leaders. So at this point, Moses has to intercede again for the people, and Aaron has to burn incense for the people. So Moses, I'm trying to paint a picture has over and over again almost had to bear the weight of the Israelites on his shoulders, in a sense. He's interceded time and time again. They've rebelled time and time again. He's seen failure after failure. And the people of Israel have managed to epically fail over and over again, despite of God's awesome, powerful works that he's done in their lives. So it brings us to chapter 20. As we just read, Moses faces rebellion again. In the face of rebellion, all the people have risen. They're in the middle of the desert. Now, why are they rebelling? Anyone answer?
Thirsty.
They're thirsty. Yeah, that's right. There's no water. That brings us to the question, who's holding the compass? Was Moses in charge of where the Israelites ended up? According to earlier on in Numbers, it explains that God led the Israelites where they went. I'll just read this verse over again so we can kind of take a look. In verse 1, in the first month of the year, the whole community of Israel arrived in the wilderness of Zin and encamped at Kadesh. While they were there, Miriam died and was buried. There was no water for the people to drink at that place. So they rebelled against Moses and Aaron. So they just end up in they wandered into the wilderness of Zin. They didn't just wander. There was the people knew there was no water for them to drink. Moses, they were aware that where they were, and where they camped and settled down, there was no water. Why did they end up in that place? Well, earlier on in Numbers, it explains that God, His cloud would reside over the tabernacle when He wanted them to stop. And when He wanted them to move from the place they were at, it would move out in front of them and bring them to the place. So God was quite literally holding the compass for the Israelites. He was the compass man. It makes you think of what we used to do back when we would patrol, and I had an instance where this really affected me personally. There was a time in one of my first phases in Ranger School where I was in a leadership position, and it was night. We had just done a huge mission during the day that had been fairly successful, and everything was good. Well, it got dark fast, and I was in charge of the night movement, and it got really dark. When I'm talking about dark, we had our night vision on, and we still couldn't hardly see the person in front of you. We were reaching out. We were walking through the woods. It was raining. And everyone was tired. Well, the point man in a military movement, the compass man, we call him, and he's the guy in charge. He's out in the front. He's in charge of finding your way as a group to the next point. He's the pathfinder, so to speak. So you have a map, and you plan before the mission starts. Okay, we're going to start here, and we need to get to here. And the compass is what gets you that direction. Well, in this instance, it was dark, and the compass man, I guess, fell asleep. So after about an hour of walking, we ended up in the exact same spot that we started. We did a huge circle and ended up. So the compass man is very important, especially in the military movements, but in this situation. And when he makes a mistake, everyone knows about it, and everyone's mad about it. Well, in this situation for the Israelites, God is the compass man. He is the one leading them to where they are. And He led them into that situation knowing full well that there was no water there. Now, you can imagine this is a huge community of people. You have fathers with children, and they have huge herds. They were cattle people. They had huge cattle, and you can imagine how much water a cow drinks. They're out there in the middle of the desert with no water. Of course they're going to start complaining. Now, God put them in that situation. Do you think He knew they were going to start rebelling against Moses? Probably. But He gave them the opportunity to have faith in Him, because if you remember, there was another time when they were without water, and God provided water for them from a rock. And so what I'm trying to get at here is that God is leading the Israelites, and He is in charge of their circumstances. He is setting the stage for them to fail or succeed. And the same is true often in our lives. When our circumstances are so bleak that we just want to complain, God is still in charge of our circumstances, just like He's in charge of the Israelite circumstances. Well, that brings us to Moses. So Moses, he's the one with the clue. He knows what's going on. He's seen God provide. He's been the leader when they crossed the Red Sea with the staff. He's been the leader and strongly led the Israelites from one thing to the next. He's always been on God's side when they wanted to rebel. When the people of Israel, when the spies brought back a bad report, whose side was Moses on? He knew that they could trust God. So he's had to wander in the wilderness for like 38 years now with these people, and he was right all along. So let's go back. Moses begins with good intention. What's the first thing that he does when the people of Israel start to rebel? He knew right away what to do. That's right. He got on his knees with Aaron in front of the tabernacle. He came to God seeking advice. From there, we see, let me erase that one. I thought I had 3 points of verses. But from there, what does he do when God gives him direction? Let's look at that in chapter 20. In God finishes his direction in verse 8. Speak to the rock over there, and it will pour out its water. You will provide enough water for the rock to satisfy the whole community and their livestock. So Moses did as he was told. He took the staff from the place where it was kept before the Lord. So the next thing he does, he gets on his knees before God, he prays, God gives him direction. And the Bible says he did what he was told. He grabbed the staff, he went over and assembled the people. He's obeying God. His intentions are to be faithless. But something happened in that process. He had good intentions. He went, the first thing he did was bow before God. Seek God's direction. God gives him direction. The second thing he does, he grabs his staff and he goes out and gets ready to do it. But what happened in there? Why was God's punishment on Moses so harsh? And you think, I mean, he's been leading these people for, like I said, almost a generation. And now, God punishes him with not being able to enter the promised land. Because it seems like a simple mishap, a little misdirection, a little disobedience. You know, God said to do it. I mean, he hit the rock before. It worked that time. Why do we think that God is so angry with Moses at what he did? What he had done? Well, if you look at it, I mean, you look at this verse here. Listen, what Moses says, and listen to his heart in this matter. Listen, you rebels, he shouted. Must we bring water from this rock? At this point, when Moses comes to the rock, where was the emphasis of who was emphasizing, who was bringing water out of the rock in Moses' eyes? Who was bearing the weight of Israel, of the children of Israel? Who had the weight of the provision of the children of Israel on their shoulders at this point? Moses. In Moses' mind. I mean, look at what he says. Must we bring water from the rock? He had the staff of God. Now, Moses knew he didn't have the power to bring water out of the rock. He knew he didn't. But think about it in his mind at this point. All that he'd been through. All the times he had to intercede for Israel. All the times he prayed that God would just not kill all of the children of Israel for their blatant disobedience. And he now is angry he's on the end of his rope. It's his final straw. They've rebelled again. He's finally fed up. He gets God's direction. He goes out to do it, and he does his own thing. He disobeys in two areas. God told him, what did God say? Speak to the rock. What does Moses do?
He yelled at them.
He spoke to the people. And then he hits the rock. And there's an awesome picture in that, because at this point Moses has already done this. He's already hit the rock. The rock has been struck. And as we'll see, the rock and this is a type of Jesus. And so in that sense, God wanted to show Moses and the children of Israel what he could do with his power. And Moses took on his shoulders what God was going to do in striking the rock, and felt that he could, with his actions, help God out. And what does God punish Moses for? If we look back, what reason did God give in this last part of the verse for such a harsh punishment on Moses?
Not trusting him enough.
That's right. God doesn't get on to Moses for his disobedience. Although disobedience was the root of what happened. God's anger at Moses, God's frustration at Moses, I don't know if those are human emotions I put into God, but God's punishment for Moses' actions was based on his lack of trust in God. Moses was evidently failing to trust God in his actions, and he proved it by disobeying God in His direction. And I think that can be easily applied, I know, in my life, in our lives. God is not watching us with a list of do's and don'ts, waiting to, oh, he did the wrong thing there. He simply wants our trust. He wants our faith. He gives us direction. And what have we been learning about love? How do we prove our love? Through our actions. Our actions aren't what justify us before God, but they are what show our heart to God. When we disobey God, and when Moses disobeyed God in this instance, he showed his heart, his lack of trust in God at that instant. God wanted to do a great thing he wanted to show what he could do just through Moses' speaking to the rock, just through his voice. He didn't need the action of Moses to hit it, to provide. That brings us to the last part. There's another picture here. Now we see, it seems to be almost the focus of this story is Moses' failure, the Israelites' rebellion. But something else happens that we should remember, and that is paramount to this story, I think. Look at the last verse in this section. Verse 13. In the second part of it, starting after the waters were on. Because there the people of Israel argued with the Lord, and there he demonstrated his holiness among them. That's what we have in the story. We have two sections, if you think about it. We had the people of Israel failing God, and God providing. This rock here, we know, because of 1 Corinthians, is a type of Jesus. Throughout the Old Testament, there are some awesome pictures of who Jesus is in the heart of God played out through stories like this. And it's awesome that he uses these kind of stories so that we can remember, we can picture something, and we can think back and say, wow, look at what God did. But this rock is a type of Jesus. And what I mean by that is it represents Jesus. It also represents God's heart for us. Because although we rail on the Israelites, I know when I was a kid, I used to read the Old Testament, and I would think, these guys are so stupid. God just did this, and now they're doing this, and now the more I live, the more I realize we are the Israelites. I am that person. As much as God does in my life, I manage to forget what he's already taught me and have to learn new things because I keep messing things up. We are the Israelites. Corinthians even says it. It's a picture for us to see ourselves. It's like a mirror. It reflects us. But God is the rock. Jesus is the picture of the rock. And despite of Israelites' constant failure, continuous rebellion over and over again, they just couldn't see it. And despite of even Moses, the most faithful of the Israelites, the one who had seen God, he had went to the mountain, he had got the 10 Commandments, he had seen the back of God. He even failed. He fell short of what God had intended him to do. He fell short of God's standard. But this rock shows God's heart for us. Because despite of that, despite of him he didn't even obey God in the direction he was given. Despite of him striking the rock, you think God could have just said, that wasn't what I said to do. I'm not giving you any water. There's no water for you guys. I'm sorry, you're going to have to find it, a different way. He still provided water. And he provided enough water in this desert place for not only all the people and their families and their kids to drink, their livestock that they were complaining about earlier in the chapter drank their fill as well in the middle of the desert. This must have been like the Mississippi coming through, the wilderness. God provided enough water. But you know what? If we don't look at this in our lives and think about it from the standpoint of we fail God. And we are, I'm sure, for the most part, very aware of it when we do. Just like the Israelites, we come up short time and time again. At least I do. But Jesus is the rock. And He will provide and has provided salvation for us when we couldn't match up to the standard that He provided. God's heart is redemption for us. God's heart, in the heart for the Israelites, was not that they die of thirst out in the desert. He brought them to that place knowing that they would be thirsty, that they would be without water, knowing that they couldn't match up to His standard. The reason why they were wandering around in the first place was because they couldn't match, they failed God, they were faithless with God from the first part of chapter 14 when they sent the spies out. And God knew that they would find themselves in this place and brought them to that place in the desert so that He could show His power, knowing that they would fail and rebel, and knowing that even Moses would fail and rebel, would fail in faith in the end. But He still provided the water that they needed. He provided. And if we look on further, we see God provide not only provision in water, but provision in healing and even victory in the end. And we are the Israelites. God, He's not going to overlook the times that we mistrust Him. There'll be consequences for what we do. And God says, for whom He loves, He chastens. But He will provide for us in the desert place. And He'll provide enough, not only for us, but not only for just us, but He'll provide over and above. And He has already provided through His Son, Jesus, and through His redemption on the cross. And I just, that's really the main focus of my message. Moses, if we look at Moses, he was bearing the weight of the Israelites on his shoulders. He thought he needed to uphold them with his actions. He thought he needed to do something for God, and God just wanted his trust. And that's the same for us today. God will provide. He wants us to trust Him. If we give Him our faith, He will show us all we need to know. And that's really the main point of my message. The challenge today is, where are we at with God? How many times have we proven unfaithful when He's given us an opportunity to trust Him in our actions and what we do? Have we failed Him? God can still use our failures, and that's the awesome part about it. But He asks for our trust. And if we place our trust in Him, He can do awesome things and will do awesome things with us. But when we fail Him, He's given us Jesus. And He's already redeemed us. And we've already won the victory. And if we live life knowing that, we can be joyful and have the fruits of the Spirit in the worst desert, in the driest wilderness. And that's the message of this story today, is that we will find ourselves in the wilderness because of our own actions sometimes. But God has already redeemed us. And if we trust Him, He'll do even greater things with us. So, if we want to close out today, I just we'll start we have a song for the invitation.
Mm-hmm.